some common CSS properties. And so every element has these properties are in common with any else. Right? I'm going to go through margin border and padding. I'm going to show you an example. So I'm going to skip that for now. And then you can see that you can apply position information to any element to go ahead and say where is this going to be rendered on the page. Okay, and again, I'll demonstrate that. Display is an interesting tag. Okay, display lets you go ahead and show something and hide it. So, for example, if you want to have a click of a button and that button then makes the birthday cake disappear or whatever, okay, you can go ahead with the display style element and just do :none for display, and it will just vanish from the page. Okay, but it's still live as an object in the computer's memory. So you can go again and do display block to show it again. In fact, you'd be doing all this with jQuery anyway, and I'll show you how to do it because jQuery makes it a lot easier for you to control the style properties of HTML elements. All right, and then of course you can do width and height. Okay, and then for textual information, you can control the font, the weight. Basically, you can pretty much guess. You guys have looked at enough web pages. You know what kind of properties you can change. Okay, so I just want to make some distinction because a lot of people don't know the difference between sans serif and serif. Okay, serif is the traditional font style used in the printing industry. Okay, the serif are these little feet that go on like the letters. Okay, and a little heading here, and that's because when you read, let's say, the newspaper, your eye actually cues on these little features, and you can read a lot faster. Okay, so for readability and speed of readability, serif is awesome. In print, all right, the problem is print has really good resolution. You go to the screen, and it doesn't have good enough resolution at times, and therefore the serif makes it look blurry. So sans serif is usually what you see on many websites. However, now screen displays are getting so good, they're almost the resolution of print quality, you're seeing a resurgence of serif, which I'm a big fan of for whatever reason. It's strange that I'm a fan of any particular font style. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and give you a quick demo of CSS, okay? And what you need to keep in mind in this demo is this idea, there's three ways you can do CSS, okay? You can do it with an external style sheet, you can do it with an embedded style sheet, and you can do it inline style. Those are the only three ways, okay? Inline style is kind of what we've been seeing, where we have like div, and then we put style equals with :100, blah, 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 okay? That's inline style. But the problem with that is that sometimes a lot of these elements share the same style. Maybe a lot of these elements have the same background color. I'm not going to go ahead and put style equals background color, on all these elements. So we introduced this concept of a class, okay? And I can now go ahead and apply the styling to the class, but I have to then go ahead and do that with an embedded style sheet, and I'll show you what that means, okay?
What does CSS stand for?
Cascading
Thank you very much. I know I drew a blank too. It's cascading style sheets, okay? And the cascading kind of, you'll see this concept of cascading. You see this principle of inheritance, this principle of order of precedence, okay? And that's what I love about Firebug, okay? Firebug, so for example, I could have a style property of width that's inline, and a style property that's on the class of that object, and on the ID of that object. And suddenly you have all these conflicts. And it's apparent because there's some inheritance going on. And then suddenly your object has the wrong background color. And you don't have a clue why. Because it's defined in so many ways, you're like, where's the conflict? Firebug is awesome because it'll actually show you. It found this style here, and it crosses it out. Say, that's not where I took it from. I found it again here, but it crosses out. Say, that's not where I took it from. And it finally shows at the top, here's where I'm getting the property. And now you understand where it's getting the property, you can debug your page. Firebug's really cool that way. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do a demo. This demo was broken 5 minutes before this presentation, so we'll see if I crash and burn here. Okay, let me go ahead and load this here. So very simple code, right? There's only 2 divs on this whole page. And I've given them IDs, they're unique, all right? The thing about a div is by default its width and height are 0, and it scales to the contents, right? So if I had some text, the div would scale to go ahead and be at least big enough to be a bounding box for the content. But these divs are empty. And you can see there's nothing on the page. However, the document object model does have 2 divs there. And you can do introspection and it'll show their tiny 0, objects in the upper left corner. All right? So let's go ahead and do a few things. So I'm going to go ahead and force the div style to have a width of 100. Okay, and then you know what? I'm going to do the same style on this guy. I'm going to go ahead and do width 100. And then I say, well, how do I make the width? Actually, let's go ahead and let's do 100. And I go ahead and make the height. Right, so I go back and forth and I define all these properties for these 2 divs. I want to realize, you know what? I want them styled the same way. How about I just give them a class? And with the class now, I can just define the properties for the class. So I started with inline style and I realized this is going to be a pain. And the reason we do, so you can see that number 1, by going ahead and putting it, actually let me do it first and then I'll talk to you what the benefit about doing this. So let's go ahead and let me go ahead and get rid of this real quick. Leave this empty. I'm going to leave this here just to show this order of precedence for now. So in the head, now we learned the first tag that can go into a head, okay? And that is the, let's see here, the style tag. And I can go ahead and say type. And what you would Google here is how do I do embedded style sheets, okay? So, you know, but this line here is always this way, okay? And then I can go ahead and actually I need to go ahead and define a class first. So I'm going to do a class equals box. Put the same class in both of them. Again, class doesn't have to be unique. In fact, the whole purpose of it is that it's shared, the value is shared between different elements. Okay. So now I go ahead and put a descriptions for box. And I'll tell you what the period means in 1 second here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do width. Oops. I'm going to go ahead and put a border on it. Make it solid. With about 2 pixels, and all right, I think that's it. Oops. Oh, come on. All right. So I want to say something here. You have these prefixes on names that show up in embedded CSS. Okay. The first one is dot. Dot is really important. You remember this. Dot refers to class. So I didn't put class equals box at the top. I put a dot. Dot means class. It's not clear, it's cryptic, but that's what it is. So if I want to refer to style properties to the class box, I put dot box. If I want to go ahead and control the style properties of box with ID, ID of box 0, I would put the number sign box 0. I'm going to show that in a minute. Okay, so dot and number sign are 2 very important symbols we use in embedded style sheets. Okay. So let me go ahead and close that style tag here. Oops. Okay, and hopefully this renders. Oh, why did my mouse just disappear? Okay. So now we have these 2 boxes, right? And you can see that the boxes get this style, all right? Width of 200, style of 200, a border style of solid border. Border width of 2 pixels. If I don't put the border color, it defaults to black. Okay, but I could have put border dash color colon pound 0000. Yes, sir.
It's still inline, right? Why do you call it embedded? Because it's still in your main page. The class? The class is defined in your inline.
Oh no. Sorry, but the style. We're not talking about where the class is always defined inline to the element. It's embedded because that's what you call it when you embed it inside the style tag. All right, so we've removed the style properties from here. We're going to start typing them all out. That's inline. And we're like, screw this. I'm not going to have inline style for this. I'm going to have an embedded style sheet, which you start with the style tag. Okay, so you can see here there's this concept of order of precedence. Okay, because I said that the width is supposed to be 200 pixels. on anything with a class of box. But you look here, and this guy clearly does not have a 200 pixel width that has 100, right? And that is because I went and override it with inline style, okay? Inline style has the highest order of precedence. It looks at that first. Then, and you can just think about it. The more specific something is, of course it's going to have a higher order of precedence. The next order of precedence is the ID, if it's an inline style. After that, it's class. After that, it's the type of tag, okay? So if I didn't preface, okay, well, let me continue with this example real quick and see if I can't wrap this up. So, let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and add a little box inside this box. And now we can see we have this concept of nesting tags. So it's totally okay to go ahead and put a div inside a div. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and define style sheets for box. Define the style for box 0 underscore 0. Again, I went ahead and created an ID for a child div for box 0. The ID is completely your choice. I kind of like this idea, okay, it's the 0th child of the 0th box, so I put underscore 0. You're welcome to do whatever you want, right? This is a system for you to help organize your thoughts, okay? So, yes?
What are the conventions for that?
There's restrictions. DOM IDs can only contain underscores and dashes. The reality is they say you can put colons in there, but colons do cause some problems. So stick to alphanumerics. I don't even trust the case sensitivity cross-browser wise. So I would never think that box, like, capital BOX is different than lowercase box. Most browsers it is. I'm not sure it's cross-browser compatible. So I like to treat it as case insensitive, meaning that the program doesn't understand the concept of case, okay? And then I only stick to underscores and dashes. But you use whatever you want. Most books will go ahead and put an ID called container. And it frustrates me because then people think a div is a container, and suddenly they think the container is a keyword in HTML. And you'll see, like, you'll Google online, how do I put a style property on a container? And it shows this code, and this code begins with a tag, container, which doesn't exist. So it's like, it's just, again, because it's in school, as professors have time to help them.
So that kind of explains why they use the dashes instead of camel notation. It seems like they don't like camel notation. Yeah, so we're going to go through this with the programming side here. We talk about some convention. Certain coding styles have different conventions with names. Camel case is what you're talking about, where every time you start a new word, so let's say if I put my box, camel case would be lower my, and then start the next word with a capital B, and it looks like a camel. I don't like that in IDs or in CSS for that reason, because I just don't trust the cross. Because in the end, you understand, this is a big headache. And I'm trying to stay away from, I do some development in JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, but I do in the context of native coding. And I'll talk about that later, because I hate the cross-browser problem. HTML5 is supposed to help that. Actually, I'm going to get to that in the next slide. Okay, so enough said. Let me see if I can remember where I left off here. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly put some properties on this child box that I just created. Let me get that, let's say 50 pixels wide. I normally don't type with so many corrections. Let's do background color, and let's make it red. And remember RGB, so FF0000. Okay, RGB, two hexadecimal digits per color, right? So here is red, full intensity, no green, no blue. Right? Good. All right, so let's go ahead and reload our page here. And now I've got this little child div in there, okay, and it's red. All right, I'm going to keep moving on here, just do a couple other things. Let's see here. There's a concept of we have a border, okay. There's a common thing with, it's called margin and padding. All right, so if I go ahead and put a margin of, let's say, 20 pixels, and padding of, actually I'm going to do this just for the top box, just to show you what's going on here. All right, so the first box means box 0. I'm just going to give it a margin and padding. Actually, I'm just going to give it margin first, and I'll show padding in a moment here. All right. So margin goes ahead and
adds, so you can kind of look at this, the whole div now extends this range here, okay? I just added some margin. It says, look, that margin, just don't keep other elements out of my margin, okay? And then the border. So it's kind of important to remember the order here. Margins first, then border, then padding, okay? That's what they call the CSS box model. It's important, otherwise you're going to get confused on and there's one other point that you can get confused on, but I'm just going to go ahead and do this quickly because we're running out of time. Okay. So we have our margin, we have our border, now we have something called padding. And padding was on the parent div. Remember, we didn't put it on the child div, we put it on the parent div. And padding implies that any content I have, how far is it away from the border? Okay. So now suddenly, the height and the width of this object is a little ambiguous, right? What is the height and the width? Is it the border? Is it the margin? Okay. The reality is the height and the width in your CSS property really starts from the inner padding. Okay. So jQuery has some nice features. It realizes this is a headache, so it doesn't let you just go ahead and say height and width. It lets you say outer height and width, because I want to get the whole outer container. That's what's really cool about jQuery. You do it in JavaScript, you've got to get all these properties, do all the math yourself in jQuery. The writers of jQuery realize that so many people are doing this. There's no reason to not encapsulate this in an API. And I'll demonstrate that on the next lecture here. Okay, so let me see if there's anything else. I want to talk about relative and absolute position, and then I'm going to wrap up. That'll kind of wrap up a bit of the properties I want to cover here. Because do you guys mind? It's 8:27. I think I need another 10 minutes. Great. All right. So I wanted to do this on box 1. Okay. So again, pound. Everyone understand the distinction between pound and dot? Great. Pound is your ID. Dot is your class. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and before I type in a coordinate, what's it shown? I describe whether the coordinate system is absolute or relative. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and now add a coordinate. I'm going to say I want the position box 1, this guy, 100 pixels. So I want the. Oh, don't do this. All right. I really screwed this up. One more time here. Sorry about that. Box 1. Let's put the position. Top. So what relative means is implied is top 0. Okay, meaning that the coordinate of the top of the box is 0 pixels away from a reference point. Now I said it's 100 pixels away from the reference point. The question is, what's the reference point? All right? Relative means where it would have been originally. Okay? Here's where it would have been originally. So it's when I say relative, I don't mean to this point here, top of the document. I mean relative to where it would have been if I hadn't put any position information on it at all. We have no position information. Here it is. Now when I say relative, it's going to shove it 100 pixels down. Okay? If I cut it right, we're almost done with this example. And sure enough, it pushed it 100 pixels down. Right? So if I go ahead and change it absolute, I think you guys know what's going to happen. It's going to be the absolute coordinates of its parent. Okay? In this case, the parent is the body. Right? You guys remember that, right? You can see it. What is the parent of box 1? Well, it's not encapsulating box 0. It's encapsulated by body. So relative to my parent. I'm sorry, absolute relative to my parent is strangely what it implies. Okay? Because if I had this div nested, like this guy here, I could say absolute position. But now it's talking about this coordinate, not the document. It's always referencing. And it gets a little confusing. You have to sometimes test this stuff out. Okay, because even me, I can't remember if you mix absolute and relative. A relative on the parents and children is suddenly, it's just like, okay, where is this going here? All right, so you see that? I put in absolute 100, now it's 100 pixels from the top. All right, so I've given you a demonstration, inline style, embedded style sheet, where I went ahead and threw it inside the style tag. And then you can go ahead and rip all this text out and throw it in an external file. Okay? The reason you would do this, if you're working alone, this might seem silly, but there's a thing called separations of concerns. You're working with several people on a project. My job is to manage the content of the web page, not its styling. So I go ahead and manage the content. Some other person manages the styling. Or on a web page I recently put out. I like the styling of jQuery, for example. And jQuery is all about styling, and it's open source. I literally can say, my CSS file, reference the CSS file from some other website. I don't even have to have the CSS file on my own website. So you have this concept of separation of concerns. I only cared about the content of my website. The styling, I want to rip off that other website. They said it's okay, so that you can do that with certain ones. One of my other websites, I use Wikipedia's CSS file. Okay, maybe Wikipedia would care. I'm not sure if they do. I think that comes from the Wikimedia or an open source anyway. So I'm going to go back to the presentation and wrap this up here before I get to see it. Let's see here. Oh, I didn't show you. So a link real quick. It'll take 2 seconds to show. And I'm just going to go ahead and show the end result here. Oh. Okay, great. So here in this case, you can see that I now have an external style sheet. And again, you don't have to remember, is it open link, rel, style, what any of that means. You just have to remember the concept of how do I call an external style sheet. If you remember that, you Google it and do a code snippet. And one thing I would like to say, if you guys are doing this, okay, it depends if you're doing this one-time website design, do whatever's fastest, okay? You don't have to learn this stuff. But really, you'll see a lot of times there's these code snippets you can grab here and there. When you're first learning it, just type it. You see that I'm typing all this stuff. It's not that, it doesn't take that long, okay? So, but if you start doing these code snippets, your code looks like a mess because one guy uses some formatting technique, someone uses some variable structure. And so I recommend that you take the time, learn it right, and you hand type everything as opposed to just cut and paste, cut and paste. All right, I think I'm almost done here. All right, so look, the effects I showed you were really lame, right? How do you change the background color? How do you change the size? This is very, this isn't going to thrill your boss, okay? The question is, what about cool effects and styling? All right, so you want to add like flame effects and blur effects to your text or hide and show stuff, okay? jQuery is fantastic for it, okay? Because if you don't use jQuery, you refer you to my good friend Admiral, okay? You wind up in a trap, okay? And the first one is the Adobe Flash trap. So you see a cool effect and you're like, I want that for my website. Guess what? It's done in Adobe Flash. And I've got nothing against the people at Adobe, but number one, now you're learning a proprietary language, if you're doing an action script, as opposed to some open language. And number two, you can kiss all the Apple guys goodbye. All right? And it's no fun to be, Apple really matters, right? The kid that if they leave the party, everyone leaves as well because they have all the cool toys. So you're not going to go ahead and exclude that whole market. So Flash, I will publicly say I really question if Flash's days are numbered. And I do really like Flash. And I like it in a formal programming sense because when you really look at the underlying ActionScript code, it really looks a lot like Java. Anyway, the other thing is a cross-browser trap. So you see a cool effect, and you've implemented it perfectly in Firefox. You've got some cool shading effect or whatever. Guess what? To implement it in Google Chrome is different. And implementing it in some other, and it's all different. So now suddenly I got this cool effect that works on most browsers, not all browsers. And now you have all these switches in your code to say, if I am in Google Chrome, do this. And if I am in, and you see all this in, your code becomes a mess. Okay? And then this is really depressing, this last one. The HTML5 CSS3 trap. Every time I hear a cool thing and I'm told that it's in HTML5, I find out from the browser, guys, oh, not yet. We're working on it. And it's really frustrating, but this place is really cool. There's a new feature in Google Chrome, and I want to know if it's going to be implemented. And there's so many contacts people have here, so they literally, this guy internet chatted some guy in Google, and I got some inside information, which was fun. But in the end, I'm like, I can't live this way, right? Suddenly they change something, and my project is doomed. So anyway, those are the traps to consider. Really, HTML5, when things settle down, will be really awesome. And now you code, and hopefully the cross-browser problem goes away. And now you can do cool things with CSS. And I would always encourage you to learn how to do it with CSS as opposed to do it with Flash. Okay? But anyway, you know the problems. Real quick, the different, like I've been using a text editor, and you can see that text editors are a little clumsy, but it's because if I use my real text editor, the colors on the screen don't work very well with this projector. Okay? But I'm going to leave you with 2 text editor recommendations. If you use a PC, Notepad++ is pretty cool. And if you use a Mac, thank you, Chuck. If you use a Mac, everyone in this office pretty much uses TextMate except for Jonathan. So again, you'll have a lot of good help here. So this is, I think, the last quiz, and I have one more slide after this. If you guys have any energy left, I'd be grateful if you did these questions, and then we'll wrap up. So I have 2 minutes here. Where do you go?
Name 3 attributes of an HTML. What is the order of the CSS box model from outward? Oh, no.
Margin?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
That crap is really annoying because like it's padding that's all done.
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to remember
30 more seconds.
order of equations, order of operations for math. I don't know what the meaning of the hashtag is in the style sheet, but I know I've used it before. Like I said, I'm using things without knowing what.
All right, guys. This is also for me to know if I let anything fall through the cracks, because I don't work off of notes, and therefore I forget stuff. And indeed, I forgot to explain some things on this question.
I don't remember covering that. I don't remember
I did cover it real fast, though. Okay, so it's not. It's more to do with the fact that we're running out of time. So just real quick, 3 attributes were ID, class, and style. Okay, an element. Remember, your ID equals, class equals, and style equals. Those are attributes. ID, class, and style are attributes that differentiate from the properties. CSS properties will width, height, that sort of thing, that are encapsulated in the style, the string that's the style is equal to. Okay. What is the order of the CSS box model? Again, it's margin, border, padding. In my head, sometimes I think MVP, like most valuable player, when I transpose the B to a B and some MVP. Anyway, I don't think that helps, but if you would say out loud a short HTML page, you would just really say open HTML tag, open head tag, close head tag, open body tag, close body tag, close head tag. I mean, close HTML tag. And that's really the smallest HTML page that you have. What are 2 values of the position property? The position property and absolute and relative as two properties. Okay. What's the special meaning of the hash mark and the dot? The dot refers to class in an embedded style sheet, and the pound means anything after following the pound references the ID of some element whose style properties you're changing. 2 benefits of an external style sheet. Number 1, separation concerns. Other people can work on it. Number 2, reusability. Maybe you have the same style for multiple websites. Indeed, you can even use somebody else's style if you really like it, assuming that this is okay with the owner. All right, so next class, I hope you guys make it. We're going to focus a little more on programming, JavaScript and jQuery. To me, that's the good stuff, all right? So hope you can make it. And the question always comes up, yes, sir?
You should also mention RUT and jQuery.
We'll ask you about that later and then bring it up in the next class, because I'm not sure what that is. This comes up all the time they ask, what is the first programming language I should learn? And you'll get a different answer from every coder, and they'll be passionate about their answer. So really, the things that usually come up most often, because of how useful they are, Python, Perl, PHP, kind of back-end, server-side programming languages, and front-end UI language, control language, JavaScript. Okay? But I personally believe if you're going to learn how to program, the greatest place to start is with Microsoft Excel. Excel lets you go ahead, understand the concept of function, understand the concept of data types, variables, conditionals, like if then else. All right, so literally, I will spend 1 minute next lecture showing you Microsoft Excel, and I think that will give you a good stepping stone to learning programming techniques so that you dynamically do cool things on a web page. So I hope you can make it. Thursday, thank you.